And we are going to add 1A here. We're going to do a flag salute real quick before we jump into it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So do we need to, I don't see a roll call here. Do we want to do that first? Make sure we know who all is available in person and or online? Okay.
Elizabeth Comfort, is not here yet. Clive Dixon,
I'm here.
Brian Kaiser is remote.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here on Zoom.
All right. Loud, coming in strong. Jim
Good.
Tall.
Here.
Mike McBride is excused. There's a chance he may remote in, but otherwise you should not expect him. And Matt Smith, Jason Fields, Gail Bizot, Lisa Rogers is also remote, and Jim McMaster.
Okay. So our first item is the election of Budget Committee officers. So I get to hand this gavel to whoever the group elects as president. So I'll entertain any nominations from the group.
You know, I'd like to nominate Jim McMaster.
I second.
I'll second it.
No, I think that I would rather, because we have these appointed budget committee members, so I'd like to, and Jim Talt has been here for a while, so I'd like to elect Jim Talt as the,
So you'd like to withdraw your name from
Yeah.
contention?
do
Okay.
that first. Yeah.
I will second that.
Okay.
Anyway.
So we have a motion that has been withdrawn by the
Yeah, that's fine. I've been here 4 years.
Jim.
It's my
You'll
turn.
accept this?
Yes.
Okay.
It's my turn, I guess, 4 years.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion on this nomination or anything online before we take a vote? Okay. All those in favor of nominating Jim Talt as president of the Budget Committee, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay. And then just to confirm, did you get the votes online?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that is unanimous. Okay, well, you have all the power. You can throw that at,
Well, we're missing a lot of our
Hey, Richard, keep
community
the
volunteers, aren't we?
people
3 of them,
online
it looks like.
so we can see them.
we have one online, Brian Kaiser.
Two.
Well, one community appointee
Budget committee
online.
member.
Oh,
Oh,
Brian
okay.
too.
Yeah,
All right.
and then one
Oh, and
board.
Lisa. Okay.
All right, let's see. Before we get into the election and nomination for a vice president, I thought it'd be useful because we tend to select from the community appointees or volunteers. It'd be worthwhile for those of us who are here or online to introduce ourselves, say what city we live in, and what, if anything, we do these days. As for you elected officials, we all know about you, so you're pretty well established. My name is Jim Talt, and I live in Newburgh. And when I was working, which I'm not anymore, I worked for companies similar to Tektronix and similar to Lam Research and Operations Management. So let's see, Elijah.
Yeah, I'm Elijah Dixon. I have one more year to work, and then I'll retire. But I work for a company headquartered out of North Carolina, a broadband company. I've worked for them for the last 30 years in their procurement organization. I've also been part of this budget committee for many, many years as well. And I've always enjoyed the opportunity to come here and to contribute a little bit to the Park and Rec.
All right, thank you. And Brian up there. Kaiser, you're
Yes,
the newbie.
I'm here.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Tell us about yourself.
Brian. Okay, Brian Kaiser, live in Newburgh. Currently down in Texas visiting family, so I'm enjoying some sunshine. But I've formerly been a CFO of a large company Most recently, I was the president of an importing and distribution business, and currently I am working for a CPA firm as a director of their client accounting and advisory services. So I've been in Newburgh about 30 years, and thought about time I chipped in and helped donate my time to help the community.
All right, thank you for that. That's, I think you're going to be a great addition. So, yeah, I have two other items here. Is there anybody that would like to suggest a vice president from those that are here? Well, I'd actually hoped to assign somebody else that job, but they didn't show. Maybe they knew what I was thinking. So I was thinking, Elijah, would you be willing to
Sure.
be the VP?
I'll second that.
All right, that's good. The other thing I wanted to say before we get into the rest of the meeting is that I think it has been perhaps the first time in 30 or 35 years that Don Loving has not been at this meeting. And I, for one, am going to miss his droll sense of humor and his parliamentarian guidance. So, here to Don Loving.
Here, here.
Oh, that's right. Yes, thank you. And we also have to do a secretary. Who's going to be the secretary? Should be somebody that's here, I think, in person. And and because we've used up our volunteers, our citizen volunteers, is there anybody from the?
I'll let Gail,
Yeah. Okay.
the
What
secretary.
do I have to do?
Just sign.
Sign
Just
it at the end?
Sign.
I'm good
Yeah.
at that.
It's a good memory.
Yeah. Sign.
So
the
who's
best
the
of luck.
motion on Gail's?
I'll make a motion to have Gail as it, they'll let Gail as secretary.
I second.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So I don't think do we need to vote on this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let's
All those in
vote
favor?
on all these nominations.
So the vote is for the.
First, let's go for
Vice President.
Vice President. I'll make a motion.
I thought we did.
We did make the motion and
Yeah.
second, but we did not vote.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. All those in favor of Elijah in that position?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye. Any opposed? I didn't think so. Now, for the secretary position, all those in favor of Gail, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good, I think we got that done, thank you. So that takes us then to the agenda. Are there any changes that anybody wants to suggest or feels we need to make to the agenda? Okay,
I'll move to approve the agenda.
A second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed? All right, let's move on.
It's also meeting dates. I'm not sure that was separate or not.
Well, I didn't see where the meeting dates were, yeah. There is I didn't find the meeting dates listed in here, but obviously if we have any problem and we have to extend tonight, we would resume tomorrow night.
It's
And-
in your letter.
Yeah, it would be tomorrow night.
In addition to the 9th, additional days will be the 10th through the 12th.
So, minutes have been approved, our agenda's been approved, meeting dates have been approved, and I think that takes us now to the white tab, which is the budget office, budget message.
I gave you a copy of the budget message, which starts on page 28 and runs through 34. The budget is a balanced budget, which is what's required by law. We have to balance. That is, the expenditures have to equal the revenue. And the district I gave you an explanation of the district between the basic service and the special service. I want to say that we have done several community surveys, and we've asked the community as a whole what they felt. George Fox has done it. They approved of the basic and the special services. That was the community itself. They liked the setup. They were pretty supportive of that. They, in your budget message, we give you the various information for each department, and in which the largest department or fund is the general fund. The general fund is $14,857,006. It is broken down into the expenditures of administration, which is $1,456,563. Parks, which is $3,830,840. Recreation, which is $4,842,951. Development, improvement, and acquisition, which is $3,671,252, and the contingencies is $1,005,000. That totals $14,857,006. The equipment and major maintenance, there's no funding there. In the system development fund, the cost there is, we have a projection of $4,730,319. Of that, $319 is a beginning balance. The rest is what we'll be receiving in SDCs, which is about what we received. The loan service fund we had developed over the years. We shifted the loan service fund to, which used to be funded by the general fund, but we stopped that and we took the loan service payments out of the SDC fund, which is listed in the SDC expenditures. The other is the debit service, which is required by law. The debit service is for the general obligation bond that we have in the district. This year, that will be $1,395,475. That will be the debit service. The capital projects fund was established when we established the debt service fund. There is no expenditures in that, but we have to show it for a minimum of 3 years after the fact. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions or concerns anyone has.
So, so on the equipment and major maintenance fund, we got on here that we didn't have any expenditures for. Well, it shows this is for 23, 24, but we bought equipment. Are we not thinking we're gonna need to buy any equipment this year, Don?
Okay, and
Just we just approved, some equipment, some maybe chippers and.
yes, that comes under acquisition under the general fund. And that is reported in the repair and replacement information. If you go to that and you see page 119,
Oh, this way, thank you.
that's where we list all that stuff.
Okay,
Let me go through it, you'll see it.
yeah, okay,
There's a big list.
there we go. So,
I was,
go ahead.
okay, I had a question, and here again, it's my first time, so excuse my maybe slightly ignorant questions. I noticed, and Don, you mentioned it, that we had a beginning balance of almost 5.7 million. Now, if last year, if we had a balanced budget where our expenditures equaled our revenue that came in, how would we have a beginning cash balance?
Because we don't spend what we budgeted. If you don't spend, that balance carries over. And you have to report that in your beginning balance.
Can you give it?
So, yeah, so I hear it. So my understanding that last year, in essence, we over budgeted our expenses by almost $6 million.
No, we didn't over budget, but what we did is we had projects that we were not able to complete. We had the bridge project, we had the project that Sanders Estate project, and we also budgeted for the Riley Rennie Field project. We did not do those projects, but they're back in the budget for this year to do.
Okay, one more question, if I may. We have budgeted $1.5 million contingency. I'll tell you, working all the nonprofits and for-profit companies, never have I seen a budget where there's, this is about 7, almost 8% contingency budgeted, and especially when you say to somewhere in here that in prior years our contingency actually spent is very, very small. So why do we continue to budget such high contingency amounts when we historically have never spent near that much?
We did that, Jim can probably explain. It was requested by the budget committee. I didn't do it. The budget committee requested that we put the 1.5 million in there, which is what we did. So that came from an approval by the budget committee itself. Did that answer your question?
Brian?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, if Jim, if you want to speak to that.
Well, I can to some extent. One thing I can recommend is that you watch last year's budget meeting, starting at about 41 minutes in, and because we had quite a discussion, and it was a long discussion. There was some debate, there was disagreement, and Elizabeth Comfort pretty much put that forward with my support to increase that contingency fund from what had traditionally been $100,000 annually to 1.5 million. Because what was happening was that extra money was not being realized or reflected or seen in the budget. So we did it for transparency. What would happen is at the end of every year there'd be quite a bit of money left over, but it wasn't being brought into the budget process, so it wasn't visible to everybody. And there were people that perhaps thought that what that was a slush fund, which it wasn't, because we couldn't actually spend it. So we had excess funds left over, and that's why you see that large beginning balance, because it was carried over from last year and recognized. basically, we put all the money there where people could see it. And we agreed to put approximately what was estimated to be 3 months of operational expenses into the contingency, which is consistent with what you'd see if you look at, as an example, the city of Newburgh, or the other example we used was Clackamas County. They all have large contingency funds like that. And I also should mention that Elizabeth Comfort, who was the president of the Budget Committee last year, is the director of finance for Clackamas County. So she had some pretty good insight into how the budget should be structured, particularly with attention to having transparency so that everybody could see how much money we had and where it was.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, I really do recommend you watch last year's meeting. It wasn't that long, it was only an hour and 30 minutes, and that section and that discussion was pretty detailed, and I think you'll find it helpful.
Great, will do. Thanks, Jim.
All right. So, we can have some more general budget message conversation if there is any. Otherwise, we can move on to public comment and then into the detailed discussion of each of the budget areas. Is there any other comments or questions about the general budget message itself? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on then to the public input. I want to remind do we have public we have two opportunities for public input. One now, and then one after we've gone through the sort of the overview of all the individual budgets. And I see that we have one person signed up. I want to remind, there may be other people that sign up after some time. I want to remind you, this is a working session, but it is also a public meeting, so we do entertain comments and questions. I would appreciate it if you would limit your comments to 5 minutes. I think that's our standard these days, is it 5 minutes?
We've been doing 3 minutes, but 5 is perfectly fine.
Yeah, I prefer 5. It's hard to make a point in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd like is, unless there's some objection, I'd really rather not have speakers sign up and then deed their minutes to someone else. If there's a speaker, say your piece in 5 minutes. Next speaker, say your piece in 5 minutes. But we're not going to share minutes.
I have a quick question here.
Yeah.
Okay, so Don, I have another question for you in regards to equipment and major maintenance funds. This year we put a roof on a building. Do we not expect that we're going to do that this year at all for any buildings at all?
Not that I'm aware of, I don't. Yeah.
I think we'll see that when we get into the detailed aspects.
Okay.
Because we're definitely going to get back to page 119 where you'll see all
If you
those kinds of things
Okay.
listed.
Very good.
To answer your question, the repair and replacement budget, we do 6 years. We do the current year that we're going into, plus we do 5 years. The reason for that is to kind of have an idea of what's out there and where we're going, so.
Okay.
All right, so with regard to public comment now, we have these two opportunities. Is there anybody who'd like to make public comment now? Hunter Wiley, I believe.
Yes.
All right, you may have the podium.
I've given the board members some handouts. This is a report that I basically file quarterly.
Yeah, if you use the podium, they can hear you. They
Oh,
can't hear you.
excuse me. Right. Hi, my name is Hunter Wiley. I'm going to comment on a report that I give quarterly to the board. This is last quarter's report. This is CPRD's current cash balance in the local government investment fund held by the Department of Treasury at the state. And I can show you the request that I submit to them in writing and their replies. Currently, the balance is right around $14 million. This has been accumulating at about $2 million a year for the last 5 years. Gets back to your question. Brian, regarding the usage of the surplus funds and where they go. This should be looked at carefully, and I'd like to know if, the question I posed to the board, not to necessarily be answered, is, are these funds being considered in this budget?
Well, I think.
You don't have to answer the question, I just want to leave that on the table for you.
Okay.
Thank
Do you have other things to say?
Yes. Two is that, do you have an audited financial for the last closing year that you're using as far as your budget preparation? You don't have to answer that. It's previous years, these have been withheld by the district for months, in one case this last year, over a year. I would assume that you would be working your budgets off of audited financials.
It has never been withheld. Never.
Well, let's look at the facts here.
All right, let's look at the facts.
Facts. When the budget was requested, when the audited financials were requested last year, numerous times they said, oh, they're under audit, we can't get them to you, and so forth. When they were finally posted in October with the Secretary of State, I obtained a copy of them through them, and they had been delivered to the district in the preceding December, even though we were told at the meetings time and time again that they were under audit and further revision. The revisions ended in December. The year before that, same instance. We were given draft audited stuff. I've got copies of them here if you'd like to see it. It says draft right on the front of it, dated I think January 23rd or so, and requested the same financials preceding year, and we got nothing until I found that they were finally filed in August. I presented this to the board. All of this has been presented to the board in writing, saying, look, these were available 2 days after the dated draft or the same day as the dated draft. Why don't you have them? And Mr. Loving, you referred to earlier, said, I've never seen these before. So these were hidden. Other
They were
excuses
never hidden.
Well, no one ever saw them, Don.
One
So
board member didn't see them, you said.
board members did not see them at
Who
all.
else did not see them that were board members?
All of them.
And they are?
These are who's ever sitting here on the board,
Don
including
Loving
Don Loving,
did not see them.
did not see them. He was the one who told me he hadn't seen them.
You asked him, yes, who else
Yeah.
did not see them?
The
This
fellow
addressed to you, they did not see them.
The fellow that, who didn't run again, not Peter Siderius, but I've forgotten what the other fellow's name was. Anyway, he was a board member, and no one had seen him, and I said, if you want them, you're gonna have to get your own copies, so they didn't have any copies.
Excuse
So
me.
two of them had not
You
seen
can
them.
direct,
All of them.
please, this is not a debate between the public here. This is,
Oh, pardon me.
address your comments to
Okay.
the board, please.
They had not been presented to the board, and those audited financials are addressed to CPRD Board of Directors, no one else. The auditors work for you. They don't work for the district, they work for you. This is true with all boards in municipal organizations. Okay, so current financials would help. I don't think these are prejudicial, they're just what the facts are. The other
45
thing,
seconds.
pardon?
45 seconds.
Okay, the other thing too is when we looked at, we brought this up to the auditors and the board about the usage of SDC funds for paying debts. And there was a $1.8 million discrepancy, accounting discrepancy, that was explained at $940,000 a year for 2 years. That was repeated year over year, and I guess that's changed. But were those debts paid SDC-related debts? If they weren't, you can't use SDC funds to pay them. That's the law. The accumulation of this level of funds, by the way, is governed by a law of which I've given you copies of. This accumulation level of funds has to be approved by the board or by voter. And it has to be stated every year what those funds are being used for and the accounting for those funds every year. And these do not show up in your audited financials and are not an ending fund balance. These are an accumulation of ending fund balances. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Those are interesting. I'll have to rewatch that at a later time so I can assimilate everything you told us, but
I'll be
thank you.
glad to sit down with any of you to discuss and present.
And could you sign up right here, please? Yeah. Don't break my lead, I don't have a sharpener. All right, here. Thank you.
All right. From the heart, I'm Bob Travers. I live on the Greens. I was part of the advisory committee in the beginning. About a year ago, I joined the committee and found out a whole lot of stuff that I didn't know about. And as you guys did when you were brought into this board, there were certain things that you were told, and it was probably untrue. First of all, there is a rollover fund that Don Clemens said that there is no such thing as a $13 million slush fund, as I called it, or a rainy day fund, and he was correct. There is no thing called slush fund or rainy day fund. What it's called in a simple form is a rollover fund. At the end of the year, when a nonprofit, or in your case a district, has certain funds, they cannot leave it in the account. They have to roll it over to whatever it is. Every year, for I don't know how many years now, there's been over between almost $900 million to $2 million in rollover funds, which we thought was because of there's certain things that are needed in the district. That's what we were told, that needed to be repaired 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So they added this fund and put it in there, the budget, put it in there, and then at the end of the year, it's rolled over. That's where all the $12.8 million of this fund that we just recently saw, starting January 31st, is left over for this district. CPRD has that much money that the state has, I'm told, in a fund that can be used for certain things. In this case, it was for roofs, equipment replacements, etc., etc. There is an exception of usage of that fund, I'm told, and that is that you, as the board, can re-allot that much money to do whatever if it's not going to be used for a piece of equipment that's going to be needed to replace. That's where we came in and we said, hey, why, as an advisory committee, why are you not allowing this clubhouse, as an example, to be built based on what money that you have available? And it was always that ignorance is bliss. I get it, I understand. The newbies that were on this committee last year that started it, they had no clue. I hope you get educated enough to realize that you own the purse, you hold the purse, you control the purse, you tell the staff and the board and the superintendent what to do with the money. You can allocate certain things. I don't know what he's telling you or teaching you, but you got to educate yourself. If he's not teaching you and educating you, please, by all means, you guys should know this by now, especially you old guys that have been around for many years. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. You've both given us some food for thought. I know that all of us will consider that individually. And tonight's task in particular, though, is to address the budget as presented, to make sure that it's adequate for the intended expenses and approve that budget. But certainly information is here that's, I'm sure, will be talked about. You offered me this piece of paper here?
Yes, that is a statement from the Department of Treasury indicating the current balance of the local government investment fund.
Is this something that we can keep?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you.
The example there is also, should you ever want to obtain that copy yourself, you can do so. It's public data.
Okay, thank you both for your comments, and let it be noted that Elizabeth Comfort has joined us. Thank you, good to see you. Sorry you missed that. You'll have to watch that on replay.
Okay.
Okay, so, is there any other public input? Anybody else? Comment? No? Okay, all right. We'll call public comment at this point closed. There's another opportunity later on at section 7. So now we're going to move on to the overview of funds, where we go down the list of different funds specifically, and we look at all those, and questions and comments. Starting with the general fund, I'll just open it up. Specific to the general fund, does anybody have questions or comments?
Yeah, just to clarify, so what they were, I believe what was being mentioned was the LGIP fund or the LGIF fund of roughly $13 million. Is that represented in the budget document here? And then what would be the explanation for that?
What do you mean?
Can you just explain that so we all understand kind of what?
Each fund, like the general fund, the general fund comes from taxes. That is, the taxes that we administer. We also produce revenue within the district. That is the amount. We produce roughly 4 million, I think taxes are around 4 million, so it's about 8 million. I'm just rounding off. I'm giving you a rough idea, but that's the general fund. Then, if you notice, the general fund is over 14 million, and the reason it's that is because we have to show the beginning balance. A number of years ago, it was requested that we get as close to showing the beginning balance as possible, and we've done that. Now, again, it's an estimation. When I say it's an estimation, how do you calculate all the expenditures between now and June 30th? It's almost impossible, but you can. There is a system. An example, currently, the current situation in '24 is that the revenue that we have as of today with last year's beginning balance is $491,421.66. That's at the end of March. The expenditures is $6,716,333.67. That's the expenditures. The projected, we project that it will be about 15.2 million in revenue at the end of the year, with an expenditure of about 9 million. So we'll have close to $6 million. And if you notice, I budgeted 5,699 is what I budgeted. As of March 23, in the last budget year, we have those figures. The revenue was $12,422,036.42. The expenditures at that time was $5,682,640.80. The ending, at the end of the year, the revenue was $14,149,574, and the expenditures was $7,973,941, .27. In other words, what we know is that the monthly expenditures for the 24 is $746,259. That's the monthly expenditures. It was in 23, it was 631,404. So the monthly expenditures went up about 110,000 a month over that 9-month period. And we'll probably keep the same deal. Why did it go up that much? If you go back and look at the salaries and those type things, and I don't have to tell you about the increase in utilities, water, and those type things, they're double digit. It used to be you could count on maybe maximum 6%, but anymore, some of those figures are up around 10 to 14%. So in budgeting, what you do, or what we do, is you budget for the unexpected or the unforeseen, and you budget the most. Why do you do that? Because if you don't do that, you can't spend it. We can only spend what you approve without bringing back this budget committee and going over it. So we have a tendency to make sure that we have sufficient funds. I will say that the staff does a good job in that over the years, they haven't spent what they were allotted, and we do have money that was left. The ending balance of $6 million in the general fund sounds like a lot of money, but trust me, it's not. And the reason is because we have projects currently that we have to complete, like the bridge project, which is going to run $4 million. The various projects we have currently, projects that are going to be in the $7 million, and will probably, by the time we're through, will be close to $9 million because of overruns and those type things, which is things we don't control. We don't control the price of concrete. We don't control the price of things that the contractors do. What we can control is to make sure we have the sufficient funds there by which to do it. The second reason for that balance is I've deliberately over the years had a larger beginning balance. Why? Because it's very simple. We cannot apply for federal money unless we have a balance, because when you spend the federal money, you don't get the money back until you spend it. You don't get the money up front. So you have to have money to spend before that. Then the money comes in. When that money comes in, it's put into the budget and goes into the beginning balance for the next year. That's the way it works. We have to report that, and we do that.
And Don, as we go through this budget process here, you'll point out those areas when we get down to them, correct? For people to see.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the other thing I want to point out is that our taxation in the district is 90 cents, 0.9076. There are 52 districts in Oregon. Of those 52, 13 of those districts are what's called full-service districts, like we're considered a full-service district. Of those 13 full-service districts, which we are part of. The average tax rate is 99 cents. We're 9 cents under what is average. Yet, we seem to find a way to do things. And why do we find a way to do things is because we've developed a system over the years that's allowed us to do that, and the staff has produced what's called special service. Special service is that is paid for by the user. For instance, recovery money. In park and recreation, the average recovery in the United States is roughly 20-something%. We're over 50% recovery rate. We're twice what the national average is. That didn't happen in 1 year. It didn't happen in 2 years. It's happened in a lot of years. And we want to keep that up if we can. The same thing with the ending balance. We need that ending balance by which to apply. For instance, this year, we applied for $1 million, if I remember correctly, for the rainy fields. We have to have the money up front, and we hope we have that next year. So when we get that grant, we can do what we need to do, because to get that grant, if the grant is for $1 million, was the project $1 million or $2 million?
It's over 2 with the road improvements.
Yeah, it's over 2, so we hope to get $1 million. But we cannot start the project until the state tells us to start the project. Some of these projects have been going on now for 2 years, and we're just like you, would like to do them, but we can't do them until all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And we have to go through a process. It's not like we can just go out and get it done. We're
Don?
not allowed to. So, I hope that brings you
I have a comment too.
up. But
So do I. Okay, much of this we're aware of because you've explained it to us in the past. In fact, as recently as the last board meeting, I think it was. I think you have a comment, Jim?
Yeah, just to break it down, because I did these budgets for the district for 38 years, and one thing this district doesn't do is when we put our budgets together, whether they're higher or lower from the year before, we're able to get that money. A lot of agencies will say, "Oh, well, I only have this much money, and if I don't spend it, they're not going to give it to me next year." Well, that's not the case with this district. The other thing is like when I did the capital improvement and replacement budget that you have in here today, and we talk about some of our large projects. So let's say that I want to, and I'm just trying to simplify this for everybody that's listening and so on. I want to buy a truck, and I put the truck in the budget. And but the truck that I have is still running well. So I don't buy that new truck. We keep running with the truck we have. That money's still in the budget. Then that money carries over to the next year. Now, I could just go out and buy a new truck, or the district could go buy new everything. But when we find things last longer, then we keep them and keep working. I
think you drove that truck for 38 years.
Yeah, I did. But I don't want people to think that, we're just spending money and all this money is going to be spent when it's in this, when it's here in capital and so on and so on. It's not. Because it shouldn't be. Because there's times we have to say, we can go another year and maybe put some money somewhere else or carry it over. So as long as everybody understands that, it's kind of a smaller picture than what Don was saying, but that's kind of how we operate and did. So that's why we have that money left over. Now, if the taxpayers want us to spend it, I don't think they do if we don't need it. So they'd rather use it for something else that we do need. So that's what I want to say.
I'm happy to see that little old yellow truck running around.
It's still moving, 1985.
Love it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll chime in and only say that there's a lot more that I can say on that. I'm not alarmed by the numbers that were quoted. I don't think there's anything amiss in there. When I look at the total budget, I don't see a problem. And I could spend some more time detailing that to you, but let's just say a lot of people are looking at, we will look at the information that was provided to us again. But for now, I'd like to move on and get into the details of this budget.
Did Lisa have a comment?
Oh, was there
Got
any?
a couple hands up.
Oh,
online. Yeah.
sorry. Didn't see that. Microphone. Oh, there.
All right, hello, everybody. So what I was wondering, Don, if you can help me understand is, in this general fund expenditure summary, where you have capital outlays of 3.482 million, how does that compare with page 119 that shows that the amount coming out of the general fund for capital outlays is 2,732,000? So we've got about a 900,000, no, sorry. We have about a $600,000 difference here, 700,000, whatever, we have a lot of difference.
Yes, and can I make a comment about that?
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Actually, a couple of things that I think there's a little bit of repair and touch-up that needs to be done on a couple of line items in this budget. And I think that if you give me the opportunity to work down through those, we will end up on page 119, and perhaps your concern and question will be answered. Would that be okay with you if we just defer that a little bit and see where we go?
Sure, as long as, and I'm not trying to be rude, so if you
Yeah.
forgive me if this didn't cross that way, as long as you're not the only one that gets to point all the things out, and that we can actually raise our questions if they don't get answered through that process.
Well, of course, I definitely would not say no to you, Lisa. There's no way.
Okay, thank you.
However, the rest of the group here can help me because I'm not often looking at that screen and I might miss it if your hand is raised. So, all right, with that, I have, oh, there we go, see? I need the help. Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, one more quick question on the LGIF. I became aware of that about a month ago. And if it has 14 million in it, and we're showing that the beginning balance for next year's budget is about 6 million, are we saying that that 8 million of that 14 million is going to be spent of the LGIF fund between now and July 1st?
Well, I think the answer to that is there's more accumulated there than just what you see in the beginning balance for the general fund. There's a similar beginning balance in the SDC fund, and that's like, I think right now we're at about $5 million. So we're at approximately $7 million right now, right like as of the end of February, I think, in the general fund, and we're at about
3.9 SDCs.
yes, at least. Well, you're looking at the budget, but I'm thinking of the actual financials of where we stand right now. And it looks like by the end of the year, we could even be at $5 million ending balance there. So if you just look at those two funds, we have accumulated a total of, 11 or $12 million there. But certainly with SDCs, if some grants and some other projects finally cut loose, that fund could plunge rather quickly as SDC funds get expended, as an example. So it's not $8 million that's going to get spent. There's $5 million in SDC and $6 or $7 million right now sitting in the general fund, much of which is budgeted.
Would it be fair, and is it within the purview of the budget committee to ask that we get a reconciliation or a breakdown of the LGIF fund? I think for transparency for us, but also for transparency for the public, so there's full knowledge and understanding of what that is, so that we clear up the misconceptions that obviously are out there in the community.
I certainly think that the information that was given to us tonight is going to get looked at. I'm personally going to look at it. I'm sure that you will look at it, and I'm sure that members of the CPRD board will also look at it. And I think that's about the best I can offer at this moment, because again, tonight's meeting is really focused on the budget that was presented to us, and not Mr. Wiley's concerns about what he may see as a slush fund or a hidden fund, and which I don't think that it is.
Well, that's fair. I want to make sure, when I first heard about it, I was wondering how it played into the whole budget. And is it money that's sitting there that should be used, should more of it be used in the budget this year? But I think
Yeah.
I'm beginning to understand, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, just think of those two numbers alone. The beginning balance that we entered this year with for the general fund, and the beginning balance that we entered this year with for the SDC fund, and we're already starting to nudge up against the 12 or $13 million number they pictured or mentioned.
Good. Thank you, Jim.
The other larger fund, there's about 300,000 in the tax fund, which is the look at that, in the capital bond debt service. There's a beginning balance there as well.
So all of those collectively together start to approach the number that he mentioned. And we have a number of funds, and there's a lot of movement of money in bills payable and those sorts of things. So at least, even though I had promised to look at this a little more, and I really don't think at this point there's any hidden fund. It's just a way of looking at money and where it's saved and where it's stored. So now I want to go on. I have some, like I said, there's some, I think some repair or touch-up work that we need to do on this budget. And
Can I point out something, going back to Lisa's question?
yes,
She said it was $3,482,002. If you take the $750,000 under the rainy field and put it over with the 159, the $1,059,000, it will add up to that exact amount under the general fund. The reason I showed it the way I showed it is because under other funds, I wanted you aware of what we had as far as grants and other funds. So I showed it there, but in reality, that's an expenditure.
And when you say other grants and other funds, it's not other bank accounts, it's other revenue
Right,
sources.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's other revenue sources.
okay.
Just as a point of clarification on this budget then, when you're planning on going out and getting grants, and you have a history of doing pretty well with getting them, do you add those grants into this budget or not? Those projected revenue sources, or are they not
No.
part of this process?
No, we only add in what we have in hand. We do not add those. It's only when we receive them.
Okay, and I get that, but then why would you put a capital outlay piece that would show that then? I mean, I feel like if we're actually anticipating that kind of money and you've been successful, why would we not consider that? Because it just, you're saying that $2.6 million.
I just explained that the reason we have to spend the money to get the money. So if you don't have the money, you can't spend it. So you have to have a higher ending balance by which to spend that money. Then the money comes in and you record it and show it. And it goes to the beginning balance for the next year. It's just an accounting way that you have to do it. Otherwise, we'd be saying we're going to spend something that we're not going to do.
Lisa, are you asking what is the 2.6 million, 350 or 300,000, 30,000 Are you asking if that is in the budget document
Thank you.
yourself? Okay, so she's asking, is this grants from other funds actually included in any of these dollars?
Yes, the 750,000 is included in the general fund under the repair and replacement, which is 3,482.02, under the general fund.
But still, I'm sorry, I'm confused, because you're adding 750 there, but you have 2.63 million in anticipated revenue from grants and other sources. So if you have that revenue,
But
where
not all of-
do I see it in this budget?
But not all of that money is in the general fund. For instance, the 2.140, which is the SDC fund.
Yeah.
So I think if we went down like 80,000 for the fire truck, what fund are we anticipating that amount to show up in? What fund are we buying the replacement fire
That's
truck?
foundation.
It's foundation.
So we'll see that 80,000?
No,
No, okay. What about the 1.8 million for trails?
yes. It will be under the SDC fund.
Okay, and then the 750,000 for Rennie Fields, that revenue is gonna show up in general
It's
fund?
in the general fund. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So does
Now-
that help, Lisa?
Yeah, no, it,
When we receive, Lisa, when we receive the 1.8 million, which fund do you put it in? Do you put it in the SDC fund, or do you put it in the general fund?
well, if it was
put
up to me, I'd put it in the general fund because there's less
Right.
restrictions.
There's no,
you know, you gotta use
it's
it.
exactly correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
If I could ask a follow-up question on that 2,630,000, are all three of those pieces guaranteed money, or are those monies we're hoping to get?
80 is secured.
They're not guaranteed money, the 2.6 million on the trail, it's not guaranteed money. We're hoping when we spend that money that we'll get back the 1.8 million. That, if we spend that, then we will get back the 1.8 million. We signed an agreement with the state, and it was a 60-30% grant,
Correct.
if I remember correct. It was a 60-30%. We have to spend 60%. The project, when we spend the total project, we'll get back 60% of that expenditure. Up
So in
to,
essence, then, if you get that money,
1.8 million. Up to 1.8 million.
So if I'm understanding correctly, all of the line items except for the 80,000 under grants and other funds are in other, either in general fund or in the SDCs. It just in case you can't, if you're not successful in getting the grant, you still can do the project because of the SDCs. However, if you do get the grant, then $2,550,000
All the
will
money.
carry over to the next year.
No,
Is that
Lisa, all the money listed there, we already have. We already
Yeah.
have signed the agreement. We have the money, but we can't receive the money till we spend the money.
I get it, but we have $6 million as a starting balance. I mean, I'm not trying to be a pain here, but to me, it's like, it's just simply, if you get the 2.5 million, it's going to roll over into the next year, which is why we continue to have a large beginning balance, if you're successful. If you're not, we spend all our money, is that right?
That, if I'm confused, by what you're saying. All I know is that we want to build the bridge tomorrow, but unfortunately, we couldn't build the bridge tomorrow because of the state and the other things. We have to budget the money to do it, because if we don't budget the money, we can't do it. If we don't do it, everything will roll over to next year. But we can't spend the money, or we won't spend the money.
Okay,
Clears my,
pardon me? All right, so, can I move on?
Please.
I have some comments. And I'm not, I call them repair and tune-up.
Are we going by, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Are we going by section, or are we skipping around?
We're still in general fund, right?
We're talking about
General
item
fund?
A, general funds
Okay.
only. And
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna lead you down a path that I have some questions on. And it's possible there's some errors, or it's possible that Jim Talt just didn't look at it well enough, and I missed something. So and there's no real problem here that can't be fixed. It's possible there's an error or two that should be fixed. So join me on page 35, which is the blue tab. And I want to mention that it seems to me like, to begin with, under expenditures for administration, where it has a number there that says 1,004,563. I think maybe that number is supposed to match whatever number is on page 29. Let's find page 29.
I would agree with that.
And it doesn't.
You're correct.
But, good, hey, I got it right after all. All right, so I want to, but it's not a hard thing to fix, I just want it to be fixed. That number is off by $189,250. If we change that number so that it matches page 29, well, that's good, because that's part of the budget message. The problem is, if you go down to contingency and loans, or development, improvement, and acquisition, that number there, $3,671,252, doesn't match page 81, and it's off by $189,250. So I think if we fix those two numbers, then everything remains balanced and it ties in well to the other elements of the budget. And do you agree? Because if you go,
I would agree with you.
if you go and you look at page 81, you'll see at the bottom of the page there where it says grand total development and acquisition, it's $3,482,002, and that's the number that's supposed to appear up here on page 35. And the difference between those two numbers is $189,250. So they counterbalance each other. It's just a transitional error. I don't know, spreadsheets, sometimes they just screw us up, right? So be noted that those values have to change.
Gotcha.
All right. So now we're looking at page 81. And the number there for total repair replacement of $1,072,242, that's supposed to come from page 119, the page that Lisa was talking about. And the difficulty I had with this is that I didn't see how that number rolled up. I didn't see where it came from in total. I could certainly surmise where some of it came from, but as an example, if you add up all of the line items under general funds, all the way down all the way down to the heading new development, if you add all those up, they don't total $1,072,242. So I was thinking that maybe we need to pull some things in there or realign our thinking there, because those numbers don't quite add up.
What it is the repair and replacement also includes new development acquisition, which is shown there. And there's 204 under 90, which, if you notice, the grand total of development acquisition is 3,482,002.
I'm not seeing that. Where is that?
The very bottom.
Bottom of 81,
Yeah, he's on
bottom
81.
right?
81.
Oh, 81.
Page 81.
Yeah, right. Well, it has 1,072,000 for, we'll just abbreviate it there, for total repair and replacement of $1 million, and then it has total development acquisition of 2409762, and those two numbers are adding up to 3482, which is the number we carried forward to page, I think it was 35.
Yeah.
What I don't see is the total repair and replacement values of 1,072,240. I don't see where that number comes from.
How can you tie that to page 119 of the projects? I think that's what you're asking.
Yes, I see this long section, and it's mostly equipment. It's almost all equipment, and it totals $532,240. That, all the things in that list, between the top listing, which is facility service truck at $69,000, and replacing dining room chairs, which is $10,000. That, everything there, which is the, we'll call it repair and replacement, all those things only equal $532,240. However, it seems like that the 1 million that we see up here is supposed to be a total of all those kinds of related activities.
Is your question where
Where
does that other $500,000
Yes.
If you
come from?
notice,
We need to pull something else into that column, into that section of Parks, Golf, Administration, and Basic Service in order to get it up there to the $1 million value.
if we add those up, they total what?
$532,240. Now, the solution that I would suggest, unless I'm misreading something here, and I could be wrong on this, is if you flip to the other page, which is the out year 25-26,
Yeah,
you'll notice the first page that we're talking about is all equipment, basically. And this page, the out year 25-26, is almost all parks, trails, roofs, and that kind of thing. And I think really what happened here is there's some items from the out year there that, at least in this year's budget, you mentally pulled in, but it's not reflected here on this page.
you could be right. I'd have to go back and look at all that, Jim.
Yeah, because
But it's a good catch.
it should all total up to,
Right,
$1
exactly.
million. And we're short right now $540,000, which, if you go to the next page there, which is the out year 2025 and 2026, it's very easy to find $540,000.
Can you give direct page numbers, please?
Yes. The out year page that I was referring to is the page after 119. It's page 120. So it was just my observation that if I was doing this budget, I would want to pull some of that stuff in there so that it all rolled up properly to match the total shown on
Correct.
page 81.
And Jim, I have an alternate possible explanation. Page 119 appears to be just the capital items or the replacements. The other half of it could be repairs. I mean, are there some repairs up in the general expenses, not capital items that need to be pulled into there for the other 500 and some thousand?
Well, I don't think that's the way it's presented or intended, because if, in our past budgets, this page 119, and by the way, the budgets are very consistent year to year, they're almost page per page. If you look at past year's budgets, page 119 usually had exactly what I'm talking about. This section for repairs and replacements and new equipment and that kind of thing would roll up and properly shown here, and then we'd see that number carried forward here. As an example, last year I think it was 5,181,000 and something other change. So my point was, and I'm sorry to belabor this, is just, it seems to me like we should drag in some items here if we think we can do it, so that we get to the proper total, or this total that's listed here. I see you're frowning, Jim, to that.
He's looking for
I'm trying to figure out what he wants to drag in. That's
Well, I said it's easy, unless you don't think you can actually do the work, but as an example, on page 120, which is the out year, and I did want to draw your attention too, that this is all equipment. And I'm sure that you have other things planned related to parks and
I know, I was gonna address that later when we get to that page, but that's okay.
like, I'll just say like Memorial Park path repair, or Hoover Park path repair, or the park shop roof, or the armory shop roof, or Ewing Young playground, etc. I'm sure you're planning to do some of that type of work this coming year. And so then I would expect to see it over here in this section.
But are those capital? Those
I
are
would
like
agree.
maintenance projects.
I would agree with you, Jim. I need to take time and go back and do that. And I can do it and have it ready for you whenever we meet again. Make that all work. I think I know what I did, but I don't want to say for sure until I get to a computer and I look at everything.
And I understand
Yeah.
that, and I think that would be a worthwhile thing to do. I think there's a similar issue with regard to new development, because if you look at on page 81, it says the new development.
Yes.
The total there is $2,409,762. And now if you flip back to page 119 and you look at the new development that's listed there, that only totals $2,199,762. The delta being $210,000. That's not reflected on page 119.
And looking at page 81, or looking at page 119, the delta that you're looking at is exactly 540,000. It appears, I mean, I would think, obviously, we would look at the park buildings, parks and trails line on page 81, which is exactly 540,000. I would suspect that got omitted from page 119.
Well, yes, except we can't see the roll-up. We can't see where that $540,000 came from. What goes into that? And
exactly, I agree.
And seeing that line item detail helps the budget planning process, as Dawn has explained and as Elizabeth has commented on. So I think, Dawn, in both of those categories, the new development and we'll call it the Parks Golf Administration and Basic Service, yeah, I think there's a little rework that needs to be done there so the numbers all roll up and tie out together.
I would agree with that.
And as Brian pointed out, the numbers are almost there, and there's lots of opportunity here in this out year to pull some stuff in. The other option, though, of course, is, and I don't think you will take this one, is if you don't think you can do these things, you shouldn't put them in the budget. In which case, we'd want to go the other way. We want to reduce the values over here, right, on page 81. But
What occurred was, we were in the budget process 3 days ago. If I remember correctly, Casey and I and Brian, and what occurred was, all of a sudden, the bridge project was going to run $4 million, and how were we going to account for that? So I went back and tried to redo the budget, and I would have probably have called it. Lisa called me about getting this budget out, and I had 2 more days to work on it and check on it, and I didn't do it, and I probably should have. But you're correct. I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
And I think I can make that clear pretty fast.
yeah, I think you can too.
Yeah.
I think you get your team together, you guys will look at the budget, you'll look at the
Right.
items that are available to you, and you'll pick the ones that are important, and they're all just estimates anyway. So if you get
Exactly.
within $8 or $9 or $10,000, something will just change so that everything balances out just fine.
I think that the comment was, when Casey and Brian and I met, we said these top equipment we were not going to purchase right away. That we would not purchase those, only in an emergency situation, because we didn't know what the bottom with the projects were going to be, and we may need that money. So we were gonna hold off on that. But anyway, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, here's my suggestion then. If there are any other comments related to the general fund, we should get those out there now. Any questions? And then we should go on, finish the rest of the items on the agenda that we can finish, which is the review A through G or whatever it is. And I would say that we have to reconvene so that you have an opportunity with your team to get that page 119 squared away.
We can do that.
I would say let's discuss that at the end, if that's pertinent to our decision making or not.
Discuss what?
If we needed to reconvene another time, I don't know how weighty that would be to our decision, so if we could save that to the end of the
Yes,
discussion
of
time.
course, yeah. The main thing is I don't want to lose, I want us to get through the rest of the budget, which I think is pretty squared away, and I don't think we're going to have any problems with it. But we want to make sure, get through that, and know what the challenges are and
All
what
right.
they're not.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let me get back here to the agenda. So we're moving on then to the B, Equipment and Major Maintenance Fund.
Well, I had something on the general fund. Does
Oh,
anybody
okay,
else
go
have
ahead.
anything on the general fund they want to talk about? The only thing, and I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but one thing that I talked to Don about is that we have a basic service supervisor under Parks. And I talked about, and I don't know if the money's there, and it sounds like we're coming back and they can discuss it. But, you know, we probably have $70 million or more in building assets in this district. And they're getting older and older and older, and we have more land that we're taking care of than before. And I've always been looking and talking about having a supervisor that could not react to the problems, but plan for the problems that happen in all these buildings. Someone that's educated in systems. So I was hoping that I would see that in this year's budget. I didn't, but I'd like the staff to think about that. And maybe having a basic service supervisor that would be grounds and a basic service supervisor that would be buildings, that's educated in systems and educated in basically preventative maintenance than reactive maintenance. So if you could look at that, that'd be great.
We'll do that, Jim. I understand what you're saying. I met with Brian, and we talked about that, and we're in the process of going through the buildings now. Brian, maybe you want to take and explain what you're doing.
Well, can I interject that the adding and hiring of personnel,
I know,
Yeah.
it might be out of line here,
Yeah.
I just thought
All
about
right.
that's more of
Let's
a board
move
meeting
on.
thing?
All right,
Good idea.
I'm just interested in, we had a lot of complaints about maintenance in the district, and they continue, and I'm just saying, we need someone that's, because I think there's too much for one person right now to handle all of it, because we're getting bigger. So anyway, I'll stop my soapbox.
A good agenda item for the next
There you go.
CPRD board meeting.
Lisa has her hand raised.
All right.
Yeah, I was, just back to the general fund for just a second. I know that I probably will sound a little bit like a broken record to some of you, but, we provided, additional money in the budget a few years ago to make sure that staff is being compensated sufficiently so that, we don't lose people, right? Because that's the hardest thing right now. And I noticed in this budget that the majority of people are not getting any kind of raise over the last 3 years.
Okay,
And
hold
so
on
for
just a
me-
moment, please. This is the
Huh?
third budget year. I appreciate you looking out for the employees here, but last year, we had the same discussion, and the year
But
before
nothing
too.
changes, Jim, and nothing changes. It's like you're going to end up losing people because they'll be able to go somewhere else. Because they can, if
I
the
understand
whole
that.
purpose was to try to keep employees, and in 3 years, when we've experienced over 15% inflation, I don't understand.
Well, you know what?
Well-
I will tell you, I understand your concern because I've had employees also. I do understand your concern. But I'm gonna have to say, what I don't understand is why you're bringing that up at this budget meeting, why you don't bring it up in a board meeting, which is the appropriate place to do that, where you can,
Well, because
we
because
can't
I
make a
can't
decision
tell-
about that.
We can't, you're right, we can't tell him what to do when it comes to dealing with staff, right? But at the budget, we can make sure there's sufficient money that goes towards salaries, and that's what we did the last time, so.
Well, let me
it-
point out to you that you have a contingency fund, and that contingency fund was most recently used to just that purpose. And so if you want to explore salary, you should do that in the normal CPRD board meeting, and you guys have the power, the authority, and you have the money in the fund, the contingency fund, to make those adjustments if the board decides to do that. But this is not the place for it.
we did that, Lisa, last year.
And
Well,
I'm
yes,
sorry
I
to be
know.
so strong on that. It's just that this is the third year, and every year we have the same conversation.
Well, I know, and it's concerning to me that we are not really addressing it either.
Well, the money is there, and all you guys need to do is talk about it at a board meeting and pull it out of the contingency if that's what you decide to do, which is what you did this last year to give some salary adjustments. But I do appreciate your concern for your employees. I've been there. Anything else in the general fund? Okay. All right, so let's see, where were we? Blue tab, I think, page 35, we're looking at the reserve for equipment and maintenance, which is a zero balance fund, I believe.
What page is that in?
Well, that would be page 35, bottom of the page. Does anybody have any comments about that? I wouldn't think so. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to the System Development Fund. That's item C, which is on the following page, be page 36, top of the page. Looks like total planned expenditures right now are $4,730,319. And the acquisition and development planning portion of which is currently $3,940,776, which does tie into page 119. Those tie together and roll up just fine. Are there any questions related to the SDC fund? comments.
Is this the place where we talk about some of the capital outlay stuff then, or are we gonna do that later?
I'm not sure. Do you have a page number you're thinking of?
Well, yeah, 119, right, which is, I mean, that is beyond, we approved this budget and he can operate the facility, but in order for us to put any money to any project on the capital outlay section, we have to approve it. And right now, I'm seeing a lot of equipment. I'm not seeing much in the way of park improvements.
Well, maybe.
And I think there's a few projects that are not on here that I think should.
This is repair, capital improvement, repair, replacement.
Yes.
list.
Actually, I think that's, your concern there is similar to what we were talking about earlier with Dawn on page 119, that the values didn't all tally up quite right, and he needed to add some park improvement projects into the line items there, so that everything tied in properly and met the $1,072,240 or whatever it is. So he has items that he's got to add back in there because apparently he overlooked some things or accidentally left some things out.
But so for example, if we're gonna, I mean, if we can talk about those projects, I think.
We lost your microphone.
Sorry, yeah, we heard from Bob Travers today about the desire for a clubhouse. And we as a board approved this $5 surcharge that we're collecting that needs to go towards that end. And so, and according to our last board meeting, Don was saying there's like $60,000 in that fund right now. And I'm thinking that we need to do a feasibility study for the golf course in order for us, otherwise you're gonna wait an entire year before we can spend money on that again. And the money is exactly for that kind of purpose. So that's a project that's missing. There's money that isn't shown right now. The cultural center is renovating the building inside. CPRD is responsible for all the exterior, and there are going to be sidewalk improvements and probably curbs and whatever that are going to be required. And we don't have that in this capital outlay. And then the third thing are like the bathrooms that we had discussed for the golf course and for Ewing Young, and I'm not sure where the third one was going, but I don't see any of those in the capital outlay either. Nor do I see anything for, well, I won't even go there right now, but those ones in particular are things that have been talked about in the board over the last year that I'm not seeing in here. So if we don't include it, are we then not able to go ahead and work on those things?
Well, that, again, I think it'd be fair to say that some of what you're saying is the same concern that I voiced, that there were some projects that really should be listed on page 119, and in fact they're not. And the superintendent said that was an oversight on his part, that he needs, that there are some things missing from that list that he wanted the opportunity to bring back in and list on that budget. And you'll recall that I also spoke about bathrooms a couple of times at the various parks. And if you look in the out years, you'll see those listed. Like you'll see, I'm not looking at it right now, but I think page 120 lists as a potential for next year bathrooms for Ewing Young, which was a great disappointment to me, but you know, there's always hope. Maybe they'll get to it this year. Maybe that'll be one of the things that the superintendent pulls forward into this year. But I do agree, there are those type of projects that you would expect to see in there aren't in there right now, and the superintendent wants the opportunity to add those in because he says that was an oversight.
The restrooms was the golf course, Ewing Young, and Rennie.
Yeah, the Rennie ones are in there.
Yeah.
Wasn't the golf course restrooms in this year's budget?
Yeah, I think we moved it. I thought moved it to this year.
It's
This,
516.
I mean, the budget we're currently in,
So
not
next
this
year,
book's
right?
budget, but 23, 24?
Yeah,
That's what's
it
right.
was, but I
Right.
don't know if we'll get to it.
Okay.
But you're right.
But does that mean because you didn't have it in until 25, 26, that you weren't planning on doing anything about those bathrooms until next year when we have a budget meeting again?
So your intent was not to budget those bathrooms, because we're kind of talking about this missing $540,000 in this year's budget, and then, so, I'm not good at math or anything, but you could take like the Ewing Young bathroom and the Crabtree culvert, and there's $550,000.
Yeah.
That's really close to 540,000. And then scoot them over here. But do you know what things that are missing in this that would account for that?
No,
Not off the top of your head.
off the top of my head,
Okay.
I don't. What occurred was, what I said was, Casey came in and said, we have a problem. The bridge is $4 million. We tried to sit down and go through that and rearrange everything. It's not something we wanted to do, but we had no choice. And then when Lisa called and said, get that budget out as quick as you can, I agreed with her that somehow I goofed up and didn't figure enough time to get it to you guys, so I wanted to do that. In the meantime, that's what caused it, but that's an excuse, and that shouldn't occur.
But just looking at this, you're not seeing those
No.
specific things that were removed. Okay.
Since we're on that page, Don, under the Sanders estate,
Yeah,
I know
we'll do a supplemental budget.
it's okay. I know under the Sanders estate, we talked about the grant money that's available that we have right now, but we have to budget for that because until I get that part. But also, I thought that we had some money in the foundation that's guaranteed for the Sanders estate.
there is.
So maybe that number should be here, so it's reflected for the public to see that there's been donations towards that park. So when you redo it, if you could put it
Yeah.
in there under other grants and funds,
We can put that in.
then we would know. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We'll do that. I agree with you, Jim.
Both Jims.
Both Jim.
He doesn't always agree with me, he will always agree with you. How's that?
I'll take
One
that.
more quick question on that, though. So can we afford to postpone the Crabtree culvert for a year and a quarter before we do anything about it?
Well, we don't technically own the property to work on it at this point. There's no easement.
And we move on.
So we're not responsible for it at
Can you
this.
see microphone a little closer?
Sorry, we're not responsible for it at this time.
So our contract with them to maintain that park does not, we have no responsibility for that culvert, is that what you're saying?
We don't own the property and we don't have an easement to our park. This has been going on for 4 years. That's-
Right, but I thought it was that if we were able to get the money and replace the culvert, then Paige is gonna give us the easement.
Well,
And from my understanding, it was because the county didn't have enough money to do their portion of it. I'm just wondering what kind of problems that we're gonna, by delaying it, are we causing? Is it gonna go from 300,000 to 700,000 because it's, that much more degraded in a year and a half?
I can't speak entirely to that, but I know it's not any more degraded than it was when we found out it was the way it is. But yes, there's, they run some big trucks over that and something could fail.
But you're not worried, because we don't own it and we have no responsibility to it, so we're not gonna include it in the budget for now. Is that right?
Well, I think it would be speculative to include it in a budget if we don't have ownership of the park or the easement completed yet. So that's why it's anticipated in next year's.
It is evident that we'll be coming back and doing this supplemental budget based on all the projects and what's occurring out there. So just be prepared for that, because we'll probably have to come back. We have not done one ever since I've been here, because it's been under the amount, but based on this, I think we'll have to come back and do a supplemental budget, depending on what occurs. And the board is aware of several other currents that might happen, and so we'll probably be back to do a supplemental budget.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is that I see that the Crabtree Culvert, the plan is to finance that out of general funds. So as an example, because you have $1.5 million in contingency funds, you have the option, whether it's directly in the budget or not, to do a supplemental, move the funds, and get the job done.
You're correct, Jim, but here's the but. I'm not sure of the cost, and probably the cost of everything that's going to occur with that transaction, which is the board aware of, with that transaction is going to be higher than the 10%. By law, the board can approve the 10%, but once we go over that, we have to call
Gotcha.
the budget committee back together and do it.
Gotcha.
Well, if it changes here, yeah,
Right,
you can do a public hearing.
that's correct. So,
So if we
anyway,
go back to the other thing that I was asking about with the cultural center though, is that one too? Because they're under construction, right? And they're not gonna get certificates of occupancy for that space unless the outside improvements have been taken care of as well. And my understanding of the relationship between CPRD and the cultural center is that the CPRD is responsible for outside and the cultural center is responsible for inside. And so if we don't have anything in this budget, I mean, that could end up causing a lot of problems. And I don't have any idea. I'm sure you all have a much better idea of what that's gonna cost.
Yeah, I did bring that up to Sean, and because we didn't budget it for it this year, that's gonna have to be addressed for sure. I was gonna go to the Cultural Center Board and ask them if they would help pay for that, some of that, seeing how this will be the third time that we've done ADA improvements on the outside.
Well, it is the city that's requiring this, it's not the cultural center. They just need to be able to get permits and then also certificates. So, you can ask them, but if they don't have the money to do it, and we don't do anything in our budget, then they can't use what has been created in our agreement with them, is that we would pay for that. So, I just feel like we're kind of in this rock and hard place right now without it being in this budget. It should at the very least be in here.
Page number 1.
Lisa, I'm gonna say that it is our hope that they will fund that. The reason is because we have funded inside the building as well. We've given funds, and so we're asking that they reciprocate, because we have loaned them money over the years to do that, and we're asking them to reciprocate. And I believe that they do have the money. But again, I'm not speaking for them. But we'll go to the board and get that squared away.
Well, I know, but we're talking about a budget right now, and if they say no, then what? Right, because we don't have it in here, and then they can't use their facility. So if you're just saying we don't put it in the budget to force them to do something, is abdicating our responsibility, because that is what we agreed to. Whether you can put it in and not use it and see if they'll go ahead and include it in their costs. I don't see any reason not to ask them. I'm just saying, if you don't put it in this budget, we can't do that work. And if they don't have the money at the end of the day, because there were a lot of change orders from what I understand, If they don't have the money at the end of the day, then what?
So this, I just think for clarification, as budget committee members, we're approving a plan and the fiscal responsibility, for the district for the year. The board has full authority throughout the year to make changes as needed if plans change. So, Lisa, I hear your concerns and your desires, and I think if it's not included in here, but we have dollars available, maybe priorities shift and the board directs the superintendent throughout the year to shift priorities as needed. So.
Yeah.
That require us to come back then and make a budget modification as a group, or can, I
No.
thought it was only 10% that he had that he could approve.
So he can come to the board, if you're gonna spend all the money and more, then you would need to do
Yeah.
an appropriation change. And then if that appropriation change is greater than 10%, then you do need to do a public hearing.
That's correct.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if we're shifting priorities and we're doing one project, maybe before another, and it's still within the dollar appropriation for the entire budget, then he can work with that within his
Okay,
scope.
thank you for that clarification, and that really helps because it's always, for the last 7 years, it's been my understanding that if we didn't include it in the budget now, that we weren't gonna be able to spend money, so thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, plans change all the time,
Right.
so you will be able to, if the needs change, the plans change, you have that ability. But it's the dollar amount you wanna
Right.
watch.
We can't spend over the amount.
Okay, yeah, good explanation, thank you. We just won't buy any more golf course maintenance equipment.
There you go.
I didn't even get a smile out of Brian with that one.
Well, I'm here. The top three items on page 120 were in this budget prior to being kicked out, so I'm welcoming the idea that we're readdressing this.
Yeah.
With all due respect to I
Okay,
understand what the superintendent's going through.
all right, let's see, where are we? I think we've been talking about system development fund, and can we move on now to the loan service fund? Which is also on page 36. It's not very big, $35,000. Do you have any comment you want to offer about that? Pretty straightforward. Anybody have any questions? Great, that topic's closed. Let's move on to the bond debt fund. Debt service.
Yeah, that is explained on page 180. What is it, 136 or 38? 136. That is the loan history. In 24-25, we have $1,395,475 on the pool bond. And if you notice, we have that going till the year 34, 35. And up above that is the other debt that we have. This is the last budget that we spend the $789,542. It goes down to 596, and then it drops to 354. And that goes quite a while to 41, 42.
So on that debt, the debt that drops off over next year is the first loan for the golf course, representing just short of 200,000, and then the next loan for the golf course, which is right around 490,000, drops off in 26. And you're saying the yearly, if we take both of those, the yearly debt service we pay in totality for the golf course?
No, the 300 and something thousand was the money that we borrowed for the pool.
Okay.
It was not the golf course. That money was borrowed to build the fitness area. It was $5 million that was borrowed, and that's what that is.
So to clarify my question, what are we paying now in yearly debt service on those two separate golf course loans? Do you know what that number is?
We combined those loans with the money that was borrowed because it lowered the price, and that's what the 596 is for the last payment in 25-26. So the golf course will all be paid for both nines.
Right. I'm just trying to get a picture of what our yearly debt service is for the golf course.
Well, it's gonna be done, 25, 26, you're not gonna have debt service for the golf course.
Which is how much?
After that.
That's my question.
Well, down up here, it's 193, 492.
We're paying the last one, which was the 214 series for the golf course, and that was 193.
Okay.
We have refinanced the debt several times because it saves us money by refinancing, and we may refinance the other money. So it just depends on when it is. We work with the SDAO on the refinancing. David Olbrich.
He's still around.
Yeah, David's still around, works with us.
Very good.
Yeah, he's a good person, watches out for us, comes in.
Okay, any more questions, comments? Doesn't seem like it. Okay, the last, well, we kind of talked about it, but let's go on to item F, pool capital fund.
Yeah, there's no money.
Yep. But we've got to list it, just like you mentioned, we have to show
Yeah.
that for 3 years, right?
Correct.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, we've gone through all those items, but we need to get back and discuss item A more. I think, Elizabeth, you had something you want to say about that, about how we should deal with the monies and projects listed on page 119 that don't total the amounts shown on pages 35 and 81.
Well, the budget has the full dollar amount, correct? It's just, we don't have the details of the projects listed on 119, is that correct?
Yes, there's no way to see the numbers. The numbers aren't there to roll up to the ones that are shown in the budget. We have no way of knowing how we got to the budget numbers.
Yeah, the project list is short 540,000 basically.
Yeah, and
but the
that's-
money is accounted for.
It's $540,000 in the general fund and $210,000 in the SDC fund that don't add up because there's no support for those values. And it seemed to me that, and Don said that was an oversight. He had it right once, but you know how spreadsheets kind of move around sometimes, and he needs an opportunity to go back with his team and identify the shortfalls and stick them back in.
We can do that. We can make it work for the amount that we budgeted. We know that. So if you want to approve the total amount, and then we can mail you out the correct, that may speed it up unless you want to come back. It's left up to you.
As long as legally we can do that, Don, and is that,
Because we're approving the dollar.
Dollars,
Yeah.
okay, dollar
I
amounts.
just want to make sure that that's all.
Yeah.
We couldn't do it the other way.
In my world, we would do it the other way, but I'm only one vote here, and I will definitely go with what the consensus is.
So would you want to reduce the budget then to match page 119?
No, I'd like to see page 119 revised to show all the line items that add up,
Yeah,
that roll up
we
into our
can do
budget.
that pretty easy.
And no, I don't want to come back tomorrow night or the next night, but my vote would be get together your team, fix up page 119 so everybody can see it, so that if there's need for further discussion, we have something in front of us that we can talk to. But that's my vote, and I will,
We can do that.
I'm open for, Jim's got a comment, I'd like to hear from actually everybody on this.
Yeah, well, my question is, it's really whatever they put in there, the staff, is up to them as far as whatever project or maintenance they need to put in there. So I don't know where we as a budget outside of that number would have, budget committee would have anything to do with that. Because that's more staff driven than it is budget committee driven. As we found out tonight, we don't, and I brought up a couple things that really is staff driven, it's the same thing.
Well, that's true, but that's the whole point of having a page 119 listing. It gives us a path, it shows us the breadcrumbs of how we got from page 119 to page 81 to page 35.
No, I get that.
And in my universe, at least, that's what I like to see.
We can approve the resolutions. And then go from there. I would point out to the budget committee that the tax rate is going down, even with the full budget that we approved. It's going from 124 to 122, so it's going down. But that's because of the increase in the valuation. So, just to let you know, the tax rate.
I
Okay,
did
well,
have-
let's,
That
Say
will
that
be
again,
on page 89.
You said it was going down?
Yeah, because
Right.
of the bond.
Oh my goodness.
If you look
That's
on
right.
page 89, I have a history of the tax rate since 74.
okay, can we make a decision about how we're gonna proceed on the revisions to page 119? What I'd like to do is just hold a vote amongst the budget committee. And the first question is should we give the staff the opportunity to make modifications to page 119 and then reconvene to review those at a later date, being either tomorrow or the next day, preferably tomorrow?
I would agree with Jim that those things, if they're added by staff, can fill out the picture, but we've already accounted for all the money in the
Which
overall
Jim?
budget.
That Jim?
Yeah, Jim, yeah, sorry.
You're looking to your
I
left
forget,
saying Jim.
I'm used to just one Jim at a time. This is, so, I think that we have enough information to pass the budget and the resolutions,
We'll
completely
move
tonight.
a
So,
couple of things and
That's
come
my
up
opinion.
with the same amount.
should we just go down
So,
the,
Yeah, we know where you stand
I'm in agreement
with
with
Yeah.
this
Jim
Jim.
and Matt.
okay?
And the Matt guy. Jim and the Matt
So I would agree as well.
All right, well, let's see, that's, and I know where Elizabeth stands on this, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
We have
6,
two on
And
We
we got
have
two
one
more.
more here.
What's up there?
Gail, what's your opinion?
Gail.
I vote for what Matt said, what other Jim said.
Approving
Okay.
the dollar amount.
I'll be known as the other Jim now.
Yeah, that's all right.
And we don't want to forget the two.
Yeah, and up there on the screen,
Yeah, I was just, Elizabeth, you just said something though, I mean, as long as it's, I'm just confused, because I feel like we're supposed to be voting on the numbers and they're wrong. The overall numbers are correct, so that's okay, but I just wanted to know, Elizabeth, whether or not by doing this, if we do it without having the revised document, is there any issue?
No, because what we're going to do is approve the budget with the dollar amounts, and the staff have sufficient amount of projects that they can do that'll be governed by the board and by the superintendent, that they can move those around, because we already know some projects get done, some projects get delayed, and so that's the natural process of doing capital projects, right? They're not going to do 100%. So by right now, I mean, we have 3 years of multi-million dollars of projects. They could pick and choose and add 540,000 from year 2 and bring those into year 1, and that could be done without our oversight. But what we did is we capped them on the dollars that they're going to be able to spend. But they need, with their manpower and resources, to choose how they're going to get these projects done in their priorities.
That makes sense. It does.
Yes, totally.
Brian, your thoughts?
Ooh, couple of questions or clarifications. Now that 540,000, that number's going to stick in my head now, whatever. If can staff, of course, we're talking about pulling things in from 25, 26 into 24, 25. Can staff just include in the 24, 25 budget things that aren't even listed here to make up that 540,000, or are they kind of constrained by what is in writing and moving those numbers around?
What, we don't do it. I want to clarify that. We'll bring it back to the board of directors, and the board of directors will make that decision. And if they feel that they're confused, they'll call the budget committee back together. But we, as a staff, don't do that. They do it, the board of directors. What I'm recommending is that you guys approve page 3 through 6, the 3 resolutions. That the amount of taxes that we'll collect, the approval of the total budget, and then the approval of the appropriations that's broken out, that we just went through. So those are the 3 resolutions that we would need to vote on.
Yes, okay. Well, we held a vote, and that.
My other question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Another question on that topic is, if we, in essence, approve this, even though we don't have the correct or full support, are we risking any fiscal fiduciary responsibility? Are we shirking it by not making sure it's all buttoned up before we approve it?
I do not believe so, because we have years of projects that we approve. We like the projects. The board has worked with Dawn to identify these projects for the district to perform. And what we don't want to have happen is if we approve dollars and then he decides to go open a 7-Eleven with those dollars. So, but that's not happening. What's happening with the dollars is that they're used for the district and for the projects that have been identified. And my understanding of how approvals work is each of these projects are going to have to come back before the board to be approved for those dollars to be spent. So Don won't be working, separately doing projects of his choosing. Each project for those dollars to be approved individually are going to come back to the board. So it is a very transparent process. And we can follow along throughout the year. We can monitor the board meetings, and we have a podium. If we disagree with what's being, the work being performed, we can voice that, just like Bob did tonight. So there's a process.
Fair enough.
All right. So, on the agenda, we have item 7, which is public input, on the budget. And before we move on to the resolutions, is there anyone that would like to say anything? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on then. So, let's see, if I recall correctly, what happens is I read these resolutions, then we look for a motion, we look for a second, and then we vote, and we move on to the next. So I'm going to start with, everybody ready? Okay. Item A, which is the approval of the resolution on the levy. So I will read it. Be it resolved that the Budget Committee for the Chehalem Park and Recreation District hereby approves the taxes provided for in the approved budget at the rate of .9076 per $1,000 of assessed value for operations under general government and $1,395,475 for bond debt. And that these taxes are hereby recommended and categorized for the tax year 2024-2025 upon the assessed value of all taxable property within the district. Be it finally resolved that the President of the Budget Committee signs this resolution. I'm looking for,
I make a motion for the approval of resolution on approving levying taxes for 2024, 2025 as so stated.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
yep, I was just watching. Kat, you got it? Okay, all right. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. The motion passes. Moving on to item B. This is the approval of resolution for approving the budget for 2024-25, as we have discussed pretty much all evening. I'll read it. Be it resolved that the Budget Committee for the Chehalem Park and Recreation District hereby approves the budget for the fiscal year 2024-25, the sum of $21,018,100 at the budget meeting on April 9th, 2024, and the following resolution affirms their action. Be it finally resolved that the President of the Budget Committee signs this resolution. Do I hear a motion?
I move the resolution approving the budget as read.
A second?
Second.
Who's the second there?
A second.
Matt is the second. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of, please raise your hand, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. The last one, I will read also. It's the approval of the resolution on approving appropriations. So what I'll go down is I'll read each fund name and the fund total. This is the Chehalem Park and Recreation District Resolution approving appropriations for 2024-25. Be it resolved that the amounts for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024, and for the purpose shown below are hereby approved as follows. The general fund in a total of $14,857,006. Equipment and major maintenance, 0. System development for a fund total of $4,730,319. Loan service in the amount of $35,300. The debt in the amount of $1,395,475. And now on the other side of the page, capital project of 0 for a grand total of all funds of $21,018,100. Be it finally resolved that the President of the Budget Committee signs this resolution. Is there a motion?
I make a motion as so stated.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So what we need is me and the secretary hanging out to sign these documents. And we get to call in the evening.
Okay. Are you gonna hit the gavel?
Oh, yeah, you know, I haven't done that. Oh. Everybody that disagreed with me, come over here close. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job.